So, with Season 1 of Deep Rock Galactic for console, 3 days and some change away from ending, and it's already live on PC, I figured I would put out a video for one tip for every enemy in Deep Rock. If you did not know, by the way, you can go to your press options and go to your miner manual, and when you click on the bestiary, and it brings up all the enemies in the game that you can face, there's an indicator right here in the upper right below disband team, that tells you how many of those you've actually killed in games. This is a really cool feature because it lets you track certain achievements, particularly the one for killing each individual detonator. So it's good for keeping track on that. The way this bestiary page works is it tells you what family of enemies it's in, where it's going to be located, where it says ground or air, the type of attacks it has and how they register, whether they're melee or projectile, special facts about them, where their armor is at, the type of armor, things of this nature. It also has their weaknesses, if any. But I'm going to put one video out for every enemy for Deep Rock. So with having a lot of them, some of them are going to be shared, but it's important to note. I might have more than one. For Swarmers, they really have no health. They die in just about anything. For Swarmers, you have two schools of thought. The first is if you run the perk Thorns, most groups of Swarmers will die instantly on your shield. However, on higher hazard difficulties, this is going to prove to be a problem for you because they're just going to kill your shield as fast as they kill it. And also, it only kills one Swarmer that hits you at a time. So if a group of 4 Swarmers each hit you once, one Swarmer will die. The other 3 will drain your shield. Then after about 2-3 seconds, another group of Swarmers hits. One of the Swarmers dies. That's 2 left. So your shield does drain quickly on the strategy. Other than that, the only thing I can recommend for Swarmers is pretty much just try and use the least amount of ammo possible on them. If you have a small group of Swarmers, use a pickaxe to conserve your ammo because they're really not worth it. The flamethrower, sticky flames, the corrosive sludge pump, just shooting one shot onto the ground, anything like that is really good for doing damage. Also, anything that has electrocution arcs is pretty good because it'll jump between them and kill them instantly. Outside of basic AoE and the Thorns perk, there's no real strategy for these. Also, if you're playing on a shield disruption mission, avoid enemies at all costs. Kill Swarmers before anything else. I'm not kidding. Swarmers will drain your health faster than a bulk detonator can on a shield disruption. Unless you are on Haz 5 where you're going to get one shot anyways. For the Glyphid Grunt, it's important to understand this is the most common enemy in the game, so you need to get used to killing them. The armor that they have is very weak. They have light armor. That being said, the armor that they have does give them a little bit of damage reduction, but it's not available on their head, and it can be broken fairly easily. The best advice I can give you is to aim for the head. Realistically, a swarm of grunts is not that much of a problem unless you're trying to do something else. If a group of Swarmers comes up on you, focus on killing them first before doing something. I'm guilty of this myself when I'm trying to speed run certain types of missions, so for example pipeline missions, where I'm just trying to build the pipeline and I'm waiting on Bosco to kill them. Yeah, Bosco's not going to kill shit for you. Just focus on killing them. Try and prioritize killing them at range as much as possible, but don't aim for the head at long ranges, or if you can't hit the shot. If you're playing something like a M1000 Scout Rifle, there's no point in trying to aim for long-range headshots if you know you're going to miss in a second anyways. Conserve your ammo and wait for them to get closer before you go for headshots. Some weapons that people say aren't good for crowd control, such as the Scout's GK rifle or the Smart rifle at a relatively close range, can actually be really good for this by just waiting for them to get close and then unleashing. At close range, you're going to have a lot of head hit shots anyways, so it doesn't really matter. Well, not necessarily the Smart rifle. Glyphid Grunts resist just about everything, by the way. They resist fire, cold, explosives, and stuns. That being said, Glyphid Grunts don't do as much damage as you would think. The main thing with a Glyphid Grunt is they're a regular Grunt that has much more armor on them than the other Grunts. But other than that, their stats are fairly the same. My advice to you for taking care of Grunts is to just take care of them like they're regular Grunts. The guards can take slightly more damage because they have more armor and because they have more resistances. That being said, I wouldn't treat them any other special way. They still go down the exact same way a Grunt does. The Grunt Slasher, however, is something to pay more attention to. These guys have less health than regular grunts do, and there's a reason for that. They deal more damage than a regular grunt does, they move slightly faster, and if they hit you with their melee attack, it slows you by 40% for 2 seconds. Now, that may not seem like a lot, but realistically, if you're trying to run away and reload, it can be. These guys should be your priority anytime a group of grunts comes at you. This should be your priority over anything else on the ground that's not going to kill you immediately. For Grunt Slashers, the easiest thing I can tell you is to kill them at range. These are enemies I would focus on trying to hit your longer range headshots, even if you're not good with them, just because if they get in close, they're going to make you have a lot of damage. That being said, it's basically just a grunt that trades health for a little bit more damage. The Ebonite Grunt is immune to absolutely everything except the Pickaxe. They're only available during a certain mission event, so you shouldn't have to worry about them. The only thing I can tell you is on the lower hazard difficulties, it takes 2 regular Pickaxe swings to kill them, and 1 Pickaxe power attack swing to kill it, depending on how you have it built. I have mine built for damage. That being said, your Pickaxe is relatively strong enough to kill these things. Don't waste your power attacks from that machine event on these guys unless you are right next to a recharger. Wardens are very annoying. Wardens don't attack you at all. What Wardens do is they summon enemies. They'll either corral nearby enemies, or they'll summon a pack of enemies on their own. The issue with Wardens comes from the fact that Wardens can also buff their allies. They give them increased defense and increased offensive capabilities. Wardens should be a priority, and you can always track where they are by the giant stream of purple that is coming out of their back. The easiest advice I have for dealing with Wardens is to use your grenades on them. Now, a few classes do not have offensive-minded grenades. That being said, classes like the Scout, for example, don't have anything that deals direct damage. But both their Stasis Grenade and their Cryo Grenade enable them to do more damage. If you hit it with a Cryo Grenade and then just unload onto it and kill it, that's my first priority. Stasis Grenades if you have the electric bonus. If you're somebody like the Engineer who might be running Proximity Mines or a Lure, you're gonna shit out of luck and just bust out the big guns for it. Wardens should be a priority in any pack. The thing to note about Wardens is that anything that gets a defensive buff from it doesn't lose that defensive buff when the Warden dies. Also, if it summons a group of Glyphid Grunts, the group of Glyphid Grunts is there to stay. Until you kill them, they're not going away. So Wardens can keep summoning enemies the longer you leave them alive. Next up are Praetorians. This is the second most common enemy type in the game that you're going to encounter behind Grunts. They have heavier armor on the front and a big weak spot on the back. There are 3 types of Grunts of Praetorians that we're going to cover. The only difference between these is the resistances and the attributes of them. The regular Praetorian is a poison-based attacker. It has a poison spray in the front. It explodes into a cloud of death of poison. There's 2 strategies for these things. 1 is to break their armor. 2 is to negate their armor. What does that mean? Their armor is their biggest strength. People always say, you need to hit the weak spot. Don't focus on trying to hit the weak spot, in my opinion. The Sludge Pump is a very good tool for doing this. It says that they resist fear, but they don't resist fire. Fire and cold are both really good ways of dealing with them because it negates their armor. Armor break is obviously very good as well. Your Pickaxe power attack is very good. I run the Pickaxe mod that gives you an extra 120 damage, bringing me up to 240, and that's enough to destroy all of the armor on the Praetorian's front and leave it near one shot. Another good combo for Scout players is to use the Cryo Grenade. Hitting a Cryo Grenade on one of these bad boys instantly freezes it, and a power attack Pickaxe is enough to kill it instantly if you're close enough. If you're not close enough, just unload. One magazine on almost any weapon that you have is going to be overkill, even if you have terrible accuracy, like you're not running spread add-ons. The Frost Praetorian is an interesting situation. It's weak to fire and it resists cold, so the cryo strategy doesn't work. Now obviously you would recommend to bring fire. It's basically the ice version of this. The interesting thing to note is that these guys slow you rather than poisoning you. And the slow is more impactful if you have a large crowd nearby. These guys, in my opinion, are slightly more of a priority than the regular Praetorians, just because of that slow effect on it. However, at the same time, the same tricks generally work. Because of the fact that you can't use the Scout Cryo Grenade trick on it, I would highly recommend that you invest in your Power Attack Pickaxe for the bonus 120 in damage. That way there you can break it and deal a ton of damage. Usually you can follow that up immediately with another Pickaxe swing, and it can die on lower hazards, or on higher hazards it's at least halfway gone. Radioactive Praetorian is essentially the exact same thing as a regular Glyphid Praetorian, only with radioactive instead of poison damage, and they move a lot faster. Normal Praetorians move at 50% of a grunt speed. These guys move at 70% of a grunt speed. These guys are the embodiment of big but fast. The basic strategy for these is that once you have their attention, they're going to close on you a lot faster than other Praetorians. Handle them the same way as a regular Glyphid Praetorian, but just remember that it has closing speed on you. So you may need to move backwards as you're firing on it. Ebonite Praetorians are the evolved form of the Ebonite Grunt. These guys are also only encountered in one machine event. These are what you want to save your power attacks for. A power attack from these guys is not going to be enough to kill it, even if you run the bonus 120 damage, like I do. So in this mode, what you want to focus on doing is getting a power attack off, giving it 1 second for your power attack to recharge, if you have the modifier, and hitting it with a second power attack to kill it. If you try and sit there and pick at it, it's going to do the same amount of damage to you as you're doing to it. It's time consuming, but you can do it in a pinch. The next enemy to cover would be the Oppressor. The Oppressor actually has two very important tips on it. So these guys have full, complete armor in the front, which means on the front here, there is no way to damage it. While that is true, it's also incorrect. Any forms of melee damage will damage it from the front with your pickaxe. Power drills and throwing axes will not work, mind you, but your pickaxe can be used to hit any part of it and it will deal damage. Anytime you see a Glyphid Oppressor, you should focus on using your pickaxe's power attack on it immediately from the front. Usually what I would do is when it's in its wind-up animation to knock you up into the air with the Rage Quake, what you want to do is try and sidestep it, hit it with a power attack from your pickaxe, which will stun it for about half a second, which will let you get behind it and unload some damage. If you miss your power attack, or if it's off of cooldown, your next priority should be area damage. Even though these guys are completely damage immune from the front, that doesn't stop area damage. So any of the gunner's weapons outside of the minigun in your secondaries, grenades, fire, cryo, these all work. Now while they do resist fire, cold, explosive, electric, and stun, that doesn't mean they still can't suffer from these effects. They can't be feared and they can't be stunned, but they can take elemental damage, even if it is resisted. So next up are the three variations of the bosses from the Dreadnought fights. Your standard Glyphid Dreadnought basically just has a health bar, and can be damaged from almost anywhere. When you're trying to damage him and his armor state, you can damage him anywhere. Once his armor goes away, you need to focus on his back and his sides. There's no real benefit I can tell you. This is the basic bitch enemy in the game, and your best bet would be to try and inflict as much damage to it as possible in a short duration. Things like C4 or cluster grenades that can burst it down relatively quickly and are good ways for ending the fight quickly. The Hive Guard is the most annoying of the Dreadnoughts. The reason why is the Hive Guard has 3 stages to each individual fight. So the way it works is at the start of each round, think of it in rounds. At the start of each round, it's going to summon a bunch of grunts, sentinels. These sentinels are like mini Praetorians. Once you kill all of the sentinels, then 3 weak spots will appear. Once you shoot these 3 weak spots, then its back weak spot will appear. So, a couple of interesting things. When the reinforcement wave is in, it's completely damage immune. There's nothing you can do to damage it. Just kill its minions and avoid the slow paths that are in it. Although other sentinels, if they follow that path, will get slowed by their own goop. When it's in its weak point stage with the 3 weak points, you want to focus on eliminating those as quickly as possible, or at least the first 2. If you have 2 or more players with you, it's in your best interest to make sure you don't pop the 3rd weak point until the other players are in a position to deal as much damage as possible. Once you've popped the 3rd weak point, it will automatically roar and go for a big AoE attack. When it does that, its back is going to be open. This is when you want to hit it with either C4, a power attack pickaxe, or whatever the strongest damage you have is. Because once it's done roaring, it's going to close that back up, and it's going to be harder to hit. You have to usually hit that spot about 3 times. So depending on how you have your character built, you can do that pretty effectively. AoE abilities will damage it through any part, as will any power attack from pickaxe, or any pickaxe hit will damage it from the front, even though it's completely damage immune. That being said, its weak points are not going to be hit by a power attack or a pickaxe regardless. You actually have to hit the specific weak point when it pops those 3 up. So just remember that. The Dreadnought Twins I really don't have a lot of tips for. Basically, there's 2 of them. They have separate attack patterns. You want to try and keep them at an even level. If one Dreadnought gets within 1/8 of a difference between the other Dreadnought, there's a chance that it will go into the hibernation phase, as we call it, where they disappear and heal each other. So if you can keep the 2 of them as even as possible, they may only heal 1 time. They're guaranteed to heal once a fight, though. So sometimes in the beginning, it's best to unload on one as quickly as possible in order to force that out early. Then try and keep them as even as you possibly can. If you have powerful abilities like C4, cluster grenades, or good damage modifiers that you can stack on top of each other very quickly, you can eliminate one before it heals. Then the other one will still go through its healing animation, but it won't be able to regen any health. Acid Spitters are one of the more annoying enemies in the game. For one thing, on Has 3, these guys can one-shot your shield. And on Has 4, they can one-shot your shield and deal a decent chunk of damage to you. These guys are absolutely lethal, and you have to watch out for them. You're usually not going to know they're there unless you're actively watching the ceilings or you get hit by one projectile. They also do a slight amount of acid damage after the fact that lingers. These guys are definitely a priority to kill for ranged abilities. If you're playing somebody like the Gunner and you don't have a lot, or not the Gunner, sorry, the Driller, and you don't have a lot of range at your disposal, you need to prioritize either Bosco killing these or another teammate killing these guys. They can also fire out projectiles very quickly. They're capable of firing out 2 projectiles every 1.5 seconds. Web Spitters are the lower damage version of those guys. They have about the same health pool and they have the exact same patterns. But instead of shooting out acid, they shoot web at you. This slows you down and obscures your vision. This can actually get you killed more than an acid spitter can on the lower difficulties if you're trying to fight off a swarm. These guys are, however, brightly colored, so for the most part you can see them easier than acid spitters on some maps. I do recommend that you prioritize them equally along with acid spitters. If you have the choice though, take out the acid spitter before the web spitter, because the damage that they do is minuscule compared to those. Menaces are annoying, but they're not particularly difficult once you understand how they work. Menaces kind of work like the Dilophosaurus from Jurassic Park, or the Stalkers from Dead Space 2. Only solitary. The way it works is quite simple. It's going to pop up, make some noise, and fire a volley of projectiles at you. Now, if you get hit by the full volley on Has 4, you're dead. Let's start with that. On Has 3, it's definitely enough to drain your shield and start draining your health. These guys like to move around immediately after they fire that. That being said, they can't move and shoot at the same time, and they don't move unless they fired a full volley. This means if you stun them, they will fire a volley again, giving you another opportunity to kill them. Although, it's difficult to stun them. Your best bet is to do these as a flank. Once you know where one is, call it out immediately, have a teammate shoot it. Exploders are very annoying. The main reason for this is exploders are guaranteed to blow up unless you hit it in the head. Now the corrosive sludge pump can deal with these guys quickly because it dissolves them, and if you can freeze them, well then they'll instantly die. That being said, these guys are pretty much suicide bombers. Anytime your shield is down, they are a real threat. Anytime you're on Has 3 or higher, these guys are a real threat. The easiest way to deal with these guys though is to shoot them at range with pretty much anything. On Has 3 or lower, any shot to the body with almost any weapon is enough to kill them. The Sabata without damage mods, you're probably going to need 2 shots, but as long as you can force their explosion farther away from you, they can actually work to your advantage. Radioactive Exploders are the same thing, but they explode in radiation. Believe it or not, these guys are actually nothing compared to their other counterparts. The radiation is damage over time, so as long as you can move out of the area of the radiation, it's very easy to get away from these guys. Personally, I don't mind Radioactive Exploders. Bolt Detonators are some of the largest and most dangerous enemies in the game. In fact, Bolt Detonators, in my opinion, are more dangerous than Dreadnoughts. These guys hit fucking hard. Let that not be understated, how hard they hit. They hit like a Mack truck. These guys have massive health bars, in fact, some of the largest health bars in the game. And on top of that, they resist a lot of things. It takes a lot of fire damage to set them on fire, and it takes a nearly impossible amount of cryo to freeze them. Even though it says they resist explosives, they resist everything, dude. You do not want to engage one of these guys at close range. Power attack pickaxes are out of the question, and if you're running a close range character build, such as if you're running a shotgun build on the scout or on the engineer, you're gonna have to just take the damage fall off and run. You cannot get close to these guys. And when they blow up, it's a near instant kill. Seriously, if you're on has 2 or higher, these guys will instantly kill you. Now, they say to hit the weak spots on the back for bonus damage. I don't really recommend that. My recommendation is to run. Shoot them pretty much anywhere while you're running. If you have multiple ways of dealing damage, such as multiple teammates, somebody who's shooting in the back can cause it to focus fire. Either that or try double aggroing. This is when one player shoots it to get its attention and starts to run away. Another player runs up relatively close, preferably somebody like a scout who can grapple out quickly, or if you have the dash perk on, in order to force it to turn around. These guys are really slow. Excuse me. These guys are really slow. So your best bet is to try and force it to turn around quickly so it can't attack. If it's moving, it can't attack. Craftiest detonators are the exact same way. However, they have a higher health bar, and they explode in gold when they die. Fun fact, craftiest detonators can give you anywhere from 140 gold, worst case scenario, to 1200 gold. This is, of course, without the pots of gold beer at your disposal. If you get a craftiest detonator, it should be your first priority to kill. Only one of these will ever spawn in one mission at a time. And it spawns at the beginning of the mission. They have a unique call that's very different from the bulk detonators. And they don't come in waves like bulk detonators can. That being said, they also have more health and more damage reduction than a regular bulk detonator does. So you should be very careful when dealing with these guys. Brood Nexuses just simply spawn green swarmers. The swarmers don't really do much. I mean, they're swarmers. But the Brood Nexus will keep pumping them out until it's killed. It doesn't say it, but it does have a bonus weakness to fire. Just try and focus on killing this if you find it. Realistically, though, if you're not bothered by swarmers that much, like if you're running the Thorns perk, you can actually just ignore these guys if you don't come across them. Now, Macteras are your flying enemies. The Mactera spawn is the most common type. It's weak to a lot of shit. Explosives, fire, cryo, pickaxe. All Macteras share a vulnerability to fire. If you spray them with fire and you catch them on fire, they take triple damage. And if you freeze any enemy in the air, it will automatically crash and die. That being said, the Mactera spawn is actually pretty weak because it has a giant yellow weak spot on its underbelly. This means when they fly up close into your face, you can actually unload into their belly relatively quickly. However, if you get a Mactera swarm of multiples, try and focus on the one that is closest to you to eliminate the amount of damage you take. Brundles have armor similar to that of Praetorians. For these guys, focus on your fire or your cryo more than hitting weak spots. They're not going to have a weak spot. Their abdomen weak spot is actually armored, and armor break doesn't do much on it. If you have penetration, it will actually do a slight amount of bonus damage to that weak spot, by the way. That being said, Brundles are really annoying to deal with. They're quite tanky, even though they don't deal that much different stats. Tri-Jaws are essentially regular Mactera spawns with slightly more health, and they fire a volley of 3 projectiles instead of just 1. The arc of these projectiles makes it very difficult to hit. That being said, with enough timing, you can actually avoid these things by stepping backwards and forwards in a very quick succession when the projectile is being fired to avoid it. Other than that, just focus on trying to hit its weak spot. 2 types of Goo Bombers, the regular Goo Bomber and the Frost Goo Bomber. Both of these Goo Bombers carpet bomb the area with a sticky, slowing field. Although Frost Bombers do it with a specifically cold one, whereas the regular Goo Bomber does a poison-based one. Neither of these attacks do damage, they simply slow you. Your best bet on these is to hit the 2 big weak spots. If you can hit it with fire or a pickaxe power attack, you're pretty much golden. Also, fun fact, there is actually a bonus weakness to explosive damage that's not listed on these guys. Grabbers can be combated very quickly from the scream that they emit. That is the combat tip on the screen. That being said, unless you know exactly what that scream sounds like in-game, you're going to rely on heightened senses a lot for the early game. Also, these guys don't do anything. They literally just screech, fly at you, grab you, and randomly drop you. The main reason how they kill you is the fact that they can drop you from a high height, and you fall to your death, or enemies can hit you while you are being grabbed by them. There's no way to break out of this ability. That being said, a small amount of damage is enough to chase it off. Any damage that can inflict 1/8 of their health bar in damage will be enough to scare it away. I do feel the need to mention this. Shooting it one time with a Sabata is not going to chase it off. Shooting it a few times from a Sabata will. Sometimes it's in your best interest just to chase them off, finish focusing on the horde, and as soon as you hear the scream, start looking up. For Nemesites, there's not really a lot I can tell you. Shockers instantly kill themselves by detonating on you. This means they can burn through your shield quite quickly, but you don't have to worry about them. Once they hit you, they're done. If you're low health, you should avoid these guys at all costs, or just try and use high rate of fire or high area attacks like the autocannon or a shotgun. Try and eliminate them before you can get close. If you're full health, full shield, just ignore them. The slow is the weakest part. Breeders will constantly keep pumping out egg clutches that will explode into regular Nemesites. For these guys, your best bet is to freeze them. If you don't have freezing available, just start unloading onto them. These guys are going to continue to put out eggs and continue to put out regular Nemesite shockers until they die, so it should be a priority. If you have a scout on your team, it should be their job to kill them as well. However, they are completely passive. If you don't have a problem dealing with Nemesite shockers, you can focus on other bigger priorities until you can get into range to kill these guys. Cave cruisers do not attack you. I do not have a tip for them. For the Quarans, the younglings are only going to be encountered for the most part in the salt pits. These guys really don't do anything besides annoy you. They have no real armor. The armor on their back is light armor like a grunt. It doesn't count. And their tail tip is also not that much of a weak spot, because it's hard to hit. These guys can die relatively quickly, so they are not too much of a threat. Just shoot it with whatever you have like a grunt. Shellbacks, however, are. While they are weak to fire and ice, the difficulty on them is actually hitting them. They're almost always rolling in a ball, making them very difficult to hit. Their ranged acid spit attack is actually slightly stronger than that of a Mactera, and it has lingering damage like an acid spitter does. For these guys, your best bet is once you see them to try and jump in the air and rain death from an angle. They have a hard time hitting you if you're already in the air. When they jump out of the air too, they're vulnerable. You can actually deal a decent chunk of damage while in air. The trawlers, also known as the land sharks, are only available in the sandblasted corridor. These guys are very hard to hit and hard to tell if they're coming unless you are running the perk heightened senses. What I would recommend for these guys is once you know that there is a trawler in play, try and stay to the high ground and out of areas that don't have a lot of visibility to them. That way there you can track it down and kill it. These guys will also continue surfing around you until either they die or they grab you. So your priority should be to try and stay in one spot and kill it before you move on to the next room. The last thing you need to do is run a Dreadnought mission, trigger a Dreadnought fight, and find out that the trawler that you left behind 2 rooms away has come back and grabbed you. Both the honeycomb and the ball wasp nest just don't attack you unless you shoot it first or you get close enough. At long range, they can be avoided. At close range, all you have to do is shoot it enough times, then it's good. They have relatively low enough health bars. The damage that they deal is really only noticeable if you're dealing with, say, a Swarmer Rave that can deplete your shield quickly, or if you're in a Horde already. The Korlak Tyrant Weed is a specialty boss fight. When you kill it, it'll drop 3 Tyrant Shards. These Tyrant Shards can be deposited for a decent amount of money and XP each. You can net yourself about 1,800 bucks if you can get all 3 shards dropped. Not to mention a decent chunk of experience. The way that these work is pretty simple. You have to shoot each of its sprouts. When you kill enough sprouts, you can start damaging the central heart. Once you deal enough damage to the heart, it'll close up and summon more sprouts. The next wave of sprouts, kill the heart again, and then it'll summon healing pods. Most people tell you to focus on the healing pods first, but in my opinion, the healing pods can't out-heal your damage if you're playing the right build. The Pickaxe power attack is enough to take out almost half of its health bar, as is most high any damage upgraded C4. You can also yeet enough grenades into it relatively quickly. To be honest, small arms fire actually doesn't do a lot to these guys, unless you're willing to put a decent chunk of bullets or have multiple people shooting. So focus on using higher priority abilities like C4, throwing axes, or your power attacks. The Betsy is annoying as fuck. The main reason why she's annoying is not that she's hard to kill, it's that she does damage to you. Betsy's do damage equal to your firepower for the most part. These guys have bombs that can track you, they have pretty accurate rates of fire. It takes 2 people to reliably kill Betsy's. Or fire. Fire works great. Fire and AoE damage can damage multiple of the parasites at a time. Essentially, she has 2 parasites on her. When you kill 1 parasite, it leaves 1 left. When you kill both parasites, the Betsy's defeated, and you can have her for your side. When it comes to killing the parasites, obviously area of effect damage is good. However, there is a trick to this. If one person is distracting a Betsy, the other person can actually get up into melee range and deal with her quite easily. Betsy's can only attack 1 person at a time. So if you're willing on playing a suicide run, you can actually deal with Betsy quite easily on your own. For the other random enemies that are listed here, Carnivorous Larvae is basically a weaker version of a Swarmer. On higher hazards, they're annoying, just like Swarmers are. On lower hazards, ignore them. They'll kill themselves on your shield if you have thorns. If you don't have thorns on your shield, on lower difficulties, just try and focus on putting 1 or 2 bullets in them. Don't waste ammo on them. Holy Hoarders are relatively hard to hit. They run away from you as soon as you get too close or start shooting them. It takes at least 2 methods of consistent coordinated fire to kill them. Even if you're by yourself, Bosco is not going to help you. You're going to have to dedicate a decent amount of resources to killing her, and quickly, or you need to move on. You'll get a ton of resources from the area if you do. You'll usually average about 40 to 50 gold, plus about 35 to 55 in each of the 2 mineral varieties available in the area. And as you damage her, she'll drop some as well. That being said, if you put ammo into her and she runs away successfully, you lose that ammo. So in certain cases, for example if she's too far away or if you're low on ammo, don't bother committing the resources. That can actually get you killed. Spitball Infectors are a large, stationary plant that will fire out large balls of acid at you. These balls of acid do not have the lingering burn damage that some other acid abilities hit, and they do take double damage from fire. That being said, you can kill them fairly easily by shooting that yellow bulbous weak point in its center, or by shooting the projectile down in its face. Their projectiles can be shot and blown up to good effect. These guys are not hard to do, and usually once you know what you're looking for, you can get the jump on them. However, if they get the jump on you first, or on the higher hazard difficulties, they can do a lot of damage to you. And even though it says their weakness is fire, try and stay at range when dealing with these guys. At close range, while it's going to be harder for them to hit you, there's also no time for you to shoot the projectiles down. Cave leeches are the singular reason why I run heightened senses. There's nothing you can do to avoid a cave leech. Really, there's not. People tell you to look up in the ceilings, but these guys have amazing reach. I just want to mention that these guys have a reach of up to 70 to 90 meters, depending on if you're running cave leech cluster or not. Cave Leech Cluster actually does make the Cave Leeches slightly stronger, contrary to popular belief. They get a slight range bonus, and they have slightly more health than normal Cave Leeches do. These guys are an insta-kill on you if they manage to grab you, if you don't get freed. So these guys should be a top priority. I run Heightened Senses specifically for killing these guys. There is no audio or visual cue for them other than Heightened Senses or just paying attention to the ceiling. So for these guys, try and focus on that. If you're playing a scout, your first priority in large rooms, because they only spawn in rooms, they won't spawn in walkways, should be to shoot a flare into the ceiling to try and see something pink. Stabber Vines are really annoying. Stabber Vines will always spawn in a set of 3, although they do only spawn in the hollow ball. When you get within a certain cone of their vision, it will rear back and launch at you. These guys are beyond lethal, but the reason is not what you would think. Stabber Vines deal a large chunk of damage on hit, but on hit they will also knock you back. This is very important to note, and that knockback will affect you, by the way, if you're damage immune. For example, if you just got revived and are trying to run over, well, you might be damage immune for 3 to 6 seconds, depending on your armor loadout. You'll still take the knockback. Stabber Vines can actually kill you off of this combo. The damage that removes your shield, and then knocking you off of a ledge before your shield regenerates to kill you. And because they can come in a set of 3, if you don't notice them first, they can hit you with all 3 of their arms. Although the first 2 are the only ones that are going to connect. By the time the second one knocks you back, the third one is not going to be able to hit. You'll be too far back. On Has 2, this is not enough to kill you except from fall damage. On Has 3, 2 hitting you will kill you, even with a full shield. On Has 4, 1 is enough to kill you. Because the knockback, if it gets you, is enough to kill you. Even small amount of knockback. It says they're weak to fire, but similar to Spitball Infectors, you do not want to get close enough to deal with these guys. My main advice on Stabber Vines is as soon as you see them, pepper them with shots until they die. I'm not kidding. If your only options are range or low damage range options, waste as much ammo as possible to get these guys. These guys will not stop attacking you until they die. It says that the weak point is the base of the claw, but you also have another issue to deal with, is that at the base of the claw is a little ball of armor that's damage immune. Fester Fleas do not have any sort of offense. The only reason that Fester Fleas are mentioned is because they're here for a mission. If you don't mind wasting the ammo, you can waste some more valuable ammo, such as the grenade rounds from the grenade launcher, or a single magnum shot is enough to kill them. They don't have a large amount of health, but rapid fire weapons, or weapons that can't instantly kill them, are going to cause them to flee and reposition, thus causing you to waste more ammo. Depending on the class that you're playing, you need to make the decision whether or not you're on Fester Flea duty or not. Loot bugs and golden loot bugs we're not going to cover. Loot bugs can be killed with pretty much any method of attack. If you press square on them and pet them, after enough pets they will drop golden nitra chunks for you. So don't kill them. Maggots are maggots. They can die from any method. The only maggots that I do need to mention are magma core maggots. If you kill a magma core maggot, it'll blow up. Much like an exploder will. That means that these guys should only really be avoided on that map. Silicate harvesters do not kill you. Mobius Cave Angels do not kill you. Hexing Niffers do not kill you. Last up we have the rival tech. This is the main reason why the title of the video says Season 1. These are currently the rival robots that are featured in the game as of right now. I'm actually going to start with these guys in an interesting order. The Caretaker is the primary boss that you're going to fight. This guy requires a full team that knows what they're doing. If you're unprepared for a Caretaker fight, you're going to die. I initially thought that the Scout was one of the worst characters because of its lower damage output, but the fact that it deals damage at range is key. You do not want to get close to this guy. It deals a massive amount of damage, and it takes a long time to bring it down. So be prepared when you fight a Caretaker. Also, important to note, it has no damage resistances or weaknesses, believe it or not. While this may seem like a good thing because it doesn't resist anything, it's also not weak to anything. This means that some of your abilities that deal less damage, such as fire weapons, because they deal damage over time, are less effective by default. The robotic appendages should be ignored. Killing these guys is simply a waste of ammo. It only puts them out of commission for a short time, and in most situations you're just going to have to tank the damage. Sorry, not sorry, Reese's. There is no way that you're going to be able to waste your ammo on these guys and have enough ammo to kill a Caretaker. For the variation of turrets that you have, repulsion turrets simply knock you back and deal a slight amount of damage. On these guys, just focus on hitting them with fire, or just trying to shoot them. They don't do that much damage to you, so they're not really that much of a problem. Burst turrets fire through round bursts. However, they only do it at a relatively close range. All of the turret shields will drop when you get within range, so you can just step back and start shooting them once the shield is down. Sniper turrets are very dangerous though. They can take out your shield in one shot, and they can take out you in one hit on Has 4, 2 hits on Has 3, and a few more hits on Has 2. They're usually spawned in a room with 2 of them. And they can track between multiple targets. They can only fire at one at a time. The issue with these guys is they will outrange you on anything except the M1000 Scout Rifle. So, for these guys, your best bet is to try and peek in and out of cover and trade shots. Shredders are annoying. They're like swarmers, but more annoying. The reason is because they're small, they fly, and they move very quickly. While they do damage themselves and kill themselves by ramming into you, the downside is these guys can take a lot of health away from you if you are low health or you don't have a shield. Fire and electricity are the 2 best bets. If you don't have that, just try and focus on spraying and praying the air around real quick for hope of a lucky hit. Patrol bots are annoying. If you set them on fire, it automatically kills them. And sometimes you can rehack them if they survive. However, these guys deal a decent chunk of damage on higher player counts and on higher difficulties. So when it comes to patrol bots, your primary focus should be eliminating these guys. They have range and they fly, and normally they're going to distract you when you're trying to kill a swarm. Most of the time, they're going to spawn off of a Prospector Drone. Prospector Drones are actually pretty easy to kill, by the way. The downside is that every time you deal a third of its health, it goes damage immune and summons a swarm of enemies. For a Prospector Drone, my best advice to you, believe it or not, is to just focus on doing enough damage to force its invulnerability. It doesn't regenerate health if it runs away, which is good. The faster you can trigger each stage of invulnerability, the faster you can actually get to killing it. It doesn't take much to kill it unless you're playing a character that doesn't have good long-range damage, like the Driller. There's going to be some new robots introduced in Rival Tech for Season 2, so we're not really going to cover those. While most of these tips have been fairly obvious, the biggest trade-off that I can tell you is to focus on what each class is very good at dealing with. Most classes have a predominant range that you need to focus on, with the Engineer having some hard-hitting weaponry for its secondary, the Gunner being primarily a long-range, a mix between a medium to long-range and an area of effect class, the Scout being good for precision, and their Cryo and Stasis Grenades are really good for applying those effects, and the Driller for close-range combat. If you have a character that struggles at a specific range, you might want to switch classes, or just try and get a different teammate to prioritize it if you seem to be struggling. Also, 2 important facts. For the Pickaxe, always try and prioritize Serrated Edge. This means that you'll deal more damage on your power attack Pickaxe. This is a better bet, in my opinion, than having a shorter cooldown. The reason why is while you might be able to get it off, you'll get 2 attacks off in 40 seconds. The downside is that you are dealing the same amount of damage as the 1 attack that you dealt in 30 seconds. For the Driller specifically, the Satchel Charge build for damage, running damage, disarm, damage, and carving, is a really good strategy. You're only going to get 2 Satchel Charges, but it is enough to 2-shot some Glyphics, Dreadnoughts. For the Engineer, focus on bringing Plasma Bursters. Your other 2 grenades don't deal as much damage as a Plasma Burster can do. While Proximity Mines on paper do deal more damage, the Plasma Burster hits more times, and you can carry more of it. On your Gunner, your primary grenade should be the Cluster Grenade. Sticky Grenades are great for fearing individual targets, but Cluster Grenades pack the most pop. If you're trying to kill big things, focus on the Cluster Grenade. And for Scouts, you need to make a choice between the Cryo Grenade or the Stasis Grenade. Cryo Grenades are great for their one-shot potential. You can pretty much freeze anything and then immediately kill it, but the Stasis Grenades can empower your weapons to do more damage. so it's a trade-off worth taking.